Welcome everyone to the Parents of Children with ADHD special event with Peter Shankman here. For those who don't know me, I'm the founder and the ADHD parent leader of Parents of Children with ADHD. And our mission is to help parents navigate ADHD with confidence in Australia. Or if you're listening somewhere else in the world, for you too. Today we have the privilege of having Peter Shankman here to talk with us. Peter's an entrepreneur and an author. He's a keynote speaker and he's done a lot of work in public relations marketing. But the best part of it is he's an advocate for neurodiversity, particularly ADHD. He is the author of several books. One which caught my eye is why I reached out to Peter originally. Is a book called The Boy with the Faster Brain. But there's other books he's also written. One that more is an adult-based book for Faster Than Normal, where he shares his insights on how he leveraged his ADHD as his superpower to success. But as well, Peter, I read that you're an accomplished skydiver.
I am.
And marathoner and Ironman. So you definitely use the power of exercise to help with your ADHD symptoms.
No question about it.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight on this fireside chat.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
What I'd love to understand firstly is about your childhood. When you were a child, ADHD really wasn't talked about. And what did people think about you at the time and your fast brain? Or were you seen as the naughty child or some other aspect?
Yeah, so growing up, it wasn't easy. I was very much different. I very rarely, I got in trouble a lot. I spent a lot of time being told to sit down, you're disrupting the class. You gotta realize ADHD didn't really exist in the 70s and 80s in New York. What existed was, again, Peter, sit down. You're causing trouble. You're acting out. You're being too loud. And I was, I guess, very good at being too loud. What I didn't, of course, know at the time is I was simply trying to create some dopamine in my brain so I could study, so I could focus, so I could listen. But not knowing what I was doing and not knowing the reasons, it obviously took a negative connotation, and I would tend to get in trouble a lot. Over time, I was able to, obviously, as I got much older, learn to handle that. But yeah, growing up was not fun. It was a lot of notes home from the teacher. It was a lot of go see the principal, go see the headmaster. Fortunately, I was talented. I was very musically talented. I come from two parents who were musicians. And so I had the ability to sing. And that got me into a specialized high school called High School of Performing Arts, otherwise known as the Fame School, the school that the TV show or movie Fame was based on. So I got into that school, and in that school, everyone was weird, right? And that helped a lot. That helped take some of the stigma away from me. But yeah, back into college, it was the same thing. It was very difficult. It took a lot of time. It wasn't until my late 30s, early 40s that I really understood what my brain was doing and how to best use it.
Okay. So in that, so the positive experience you had growing up, therefore, was being able to go to this Fame type school where you met all other strange people.
Correct.
That didn't fit the mold, and that helped you achieve. Did you start to learn that your brain also, because your brain would have been still fast, even though all these people was, they might have been good at singing or good at dancing or all sorts of other things. But did you find that you had any real positive experiences that made you go, I'm special, like my brain works very differently, and that's what will help me get ahead?
Well, I didn't realize at the time, but definitely being on stage, performing, acting, singing, having an audience cheer for me, those kind of things were pretty incredible, because what those did was those gave me dopamine. And that's what your brain craves when you're ADHD. So I was sitting there looking for dopamine, and I'd go on stage and I'd cheer and I'd get applause, and all of a sudden I'd have it, and I felt amazing. It was essentially runner's high, if you can imagine. But again, I didn't know why. I had no idea why I was getting that level of runner's high, or that level of excitement. And it wasn't until, again, years later, that I put the two and two together. I remember finishing my first marathon, or standing up after my first skydive and just feeling high, right? And I couldn't understand why. That was why.
Okay. So in the power of hindsight, is there anything your parents or your teachers could have done differently? Do you think that your parents sending to the school was the best that they could think to do to help you? Or is there something else you think that they could have done?
My parents were amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're still alive. We're still very close. We're wonderful in that regard. It's not so much what they did. It was simply the fact that the way my brain worked, no one really understood it back then. ADHD did not exist. I mean, it existed, but no one knew what it was. What it was he's a difficult child, right? He's a difficult student. He doesn't learn well. He's, I remember the subjects I loved, I did very well in, right? So English, social studies, I was top of my class because I love that stuff. And when you love something, when you're ADHD, you zone in and hyper focus on it. When you hate something, or you're not good at something, when you're not good at something, you hate it. And so, as great as I was at English or social studies, that's as bad as I was at math or science. And so I remember one day, the couple of the teachers had gathered for a conversation about me. And the English teacher and the science teacher, or the English teacher and the math teacher, almost got into a physical altercation because they couldn't believe they were talking about the same person. Because the English teacher's saying, "What are you talking about? He's attentive. He does his assignments on time. He's getting straight A's." And the math teacher's like, "Are you crazy? This is Peter Shankman we're talking about. He's never passed a class. He can't do this. What's wrong with you?" And they're back and forth, because I sounded like two completely separate people. And again, if I'd been smarter, I would have realized they are talking about the same person in different situations. Fast forward to today, I have an assistant who makes me very aware of the things that I am supposed to do. I'll give you a perfect example. In my calendar, today's conversation said 6 a.m. Eastern time, which is here in New York. And I knew it was 6 a.m. And I knew it was 6 a.m. And I looked at the calendar and it said 6 a.m. And, 15 different times yesterday, I looked at it, said 6 a.m. And I woke up at 5 a.m. today to do a little bit of exercise before, because exercise gives me that dopamine, to do it before I got on this call. So I knew I'd be awake and ready to go. And I said, okay, it's 5 a.m. I'm going to work out. And then I have time to take a shower because I'm not speaking until 7 a.m. And 15 times I read it yesterday. It said 6 a.m. And I said, okay, not going on until 7 a.m. I'm all set. And because of how my brain works, at 5:45, my phone rings. And it's my assistant in a very sleepy voice who set her alarm at 5:44 a.m. to call me to make sure I knew it was in fact 6 a.m. And I'm like, hello? And she's like, you're speaking in 15 minutes. No, honey, I'm speaking in an hour 15. You're speaking in 15 minutes. Make sure you're there. I'm going back to bed. And she hung up the phone. I'm like, son of a bitch, I am speaking in 15 minutes. So that's ADHD, right? And it's that there have been times, I remember I did an Instagram reel about this. I about 6 months ago, I wrote, I had a 10 a.m. eye doctor appointment right near my daughter's school. And I dropped my daughter off at 8 o'clock to go to school. And this is New York City, so you don't drive her where you take, we have a scooter or we walk or whatever. So we walk to school. It's about 2.5 miles away. We walk to school. I drop her off at 8 a.m. and I'm hurrying up because I have a 9 o'clock appointment. It's about 45 minutes away, and I get to the eye doctor and they're not open yet. I'm like, what the hell? Look at my calendar, it says 10 a.m., not 9 a.m. So these are the things we do. And we put rules into place and situations into place to try and prevent doing that as much as possible, but it still happens occasionally.
I like Svetlana's comment. She just said that your assistant sounds like they're the best. I think everyone needs an assistant that rings you up to make sure you haven't missed that. You're not going to miss the meeting.
My favorite story about, I've had Megan for over 15 years now, since when the hell did I get her? 2008. So yeah, 16 years. So my best story about Megan is about 6 months into her relationship with me, her working with me. I go to put something into my calendar and my calendar's not working. I had Google Apps, whatever at the time. And I go to put something in my calendar's not working. And I send her a text. I'm like, Megan, something's up with the calendar. It's not working. I tried to put something in. And she goes, oh, no, it's working fine. I'm like, well, it's not letting me put something in. She's like, right, that means it's working fine. You no longer have write access to your calendar. I say, excuse me? She goes, you booked 2 dinners on the same night. So I took access to your calendar away. You can read what's on there, but if you want to schedule something, you send it to me and I'll tell you whether or not you can do it. And if you can do it, I'll put it in the calendar. I'm like, that's really rude. I mean, I scheduled 2 dinners on the same night. That's not a big deal. I'm sure they're close to each other. I can cancel one. She just stops. She sighs. She goes, Peter, you scheduled 2 dinners on the same night on separate continents. You're done with your calendar. And that was the last time I ever had access to my calendar. And so now, 99% of the time it's in there. I can see it. I do it. But for certain things like this early in the morning or whatever, she does a little bit of follow-up. And it's wonderful. I'm very fortunate. I would not have the success I have today without her and without eventually learning to understand my brain. Because keep in mind, my brain cost me my marriage. I mean, I have a wonderful relationship with my ex-wife. We're great friends. I have my daughter a lot of the time, like over half the time. She's sleeping in her room right now over there. And it's wonderful. She's 11 and it's the best dad-daughter relationship you could ever imagine. Like I said, I'm great friends with my ex-wife, but my brain not knowing how to drive it or learning late or still learning, has been a tremendous success, but I'll candidly say it has cost me a lot as well.
Okay. I can hear, well, we've had some comments that says it is relatable, but I know that I've seen ADHD people book 2 things at once. Not sure if I've seen the same on different continents. We don't travel that much, or maybe other people do. But in Australia, it's not as, we don't do that as much, but I've seen people book multiple events at the same time. And, it just can cause all sorts of trouble when you realize you can't be in 2 places at once, even if you split your body in half. And that's not possible.
Sure.
So definitely can relate to that. Does your daughter have ADHD? Is one of the questions that just asked.
She's never been formally diagnosed. I see a lot of the same traits in her that I have in me, but the difference is that I know what to look for. And again, I'm not a doctor. And I've never claimed to be a doctor, but I do know what to look for. If it ever gets to the point where it impacts her, I will certainly get her diagnosed. But I think that right now, whatever she has, she sees me and she understands how to manage it. Perfect example, her school starts next week after Labor Day here in the U.S. And so she's had 2 books to read this summer for school. And, the same way I did, she left them all to the last minute. And to her credit, she finished them. But, she was reading the second book a few days ago and she's been reading and reading for like 2 hours and she's starting to get, her eyes are glazing over and she's not focusing. And I said, honey, maybe it's time for a little exercise. And so she sits down on the floor and she does a 20-minute Peloton yoga class on the TV and stands up after it's over. Deep breath. I see the physical difference in her, right? She got that dopamine. She goes, sits back on the couch, finishes reading, and she's totally focused. So there is definitely a level of neurodiversity within her. But again, if it hasn't started affecting her yet, if it doesn't negatively affect her or anything like that, I'm more than happy just to let it be. Her mom is the most, like her mom is the poster child for neurotypical, right? Her mom is not ADHD by any. Her mom might have some issues on the other end of the spectrum, but she is not ADHD by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't necessarily bring it up. I just see what happens, and like I said, so far she's very. I haven't seen anything to affect that. So we'll see what happens.
And you talked about the exercise with your daughter just now, that she does some exercise. And you were talking before that this morning you woke up and made sure you exercise before this to help calm your brain, or so you can be more focused on this talk. What type of exercise do you do that's in the morning to get yourself ready in the morning?
So I have a Peloton bike, which sits in about 3 inches from my bed. And the nice thing about that is that before I go to sleep, I put on a pair of biking shorts, right? Spandex biking shorts, and a pair of socks. And it might seem weird, and I'm not saying I do this all the time. I don't necessarily do this when my girlfriend's over, but when I'm alone, I'm home, and my daughter's in her room, and I have her, and I know that I have to wake up the next morning, and I know that because she's here, I can't go out for a run or I can't go to the gym. I sleep in bike shorts and socks. And then when I wake up, I am 3 inches from my Peloton bike, right? So all I have to do is roll out of bed and roll onto the bike. I don't even have to open my eyes. And I'm exercising. And it might take 5 or 10 minutes before I open my eyes, but I'm exercising. And once I'm not going to wake up and say, well, I'm in my workout clothes, I'm just not going to work out, right? Then I just feel like a loser. So I call it playing the tape forward, right? When I go to bed and I'm putting on my bike shorts, I say, how am I going to feel in 12 hours? How am I going to feel in 8 hours? How am I going to feel? It's 9 p.m. now. How am I going to feel at 9 a.m. when it's been 3 hours and I haven't exercised yet? Am I going to feel as good as I can? Or should I work out? Right? Sometimes when I wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and I don't want to exercise, and there are a lot of days where I don't want to wake up and exercise, but I ask myself, okay, what's your schedule today? Well, you have 4 meetings, then you have to pick up your daughter, then you have a dinner. How are you going to feel by 6 p.m.? Are you going to want to go to that dinner? Are you going to blow it off? Or if you exercise, if you get your ass out of bed and get on the bike, just do 40 minutes or an hour, what's that going to do for the rest of your day? Right? Oh, the dog's awake. That means the daughter can't be far behind. Come here, Waffle. So you do that, and it becomes that question of, okay, how do I feel now? How am I going to feel? So playing the tape forward is a huge component of having ADHD, because I understand both positive and negative, what the end results could be. I'll give you another example. I very rarely drink, right? Because when you're ADHD, I joke, I only have 2 speeds. I have namaste and I'll cut a bitch. And there's literally no middle ground there, right? Those are my 2 speeds, namaste and I'll cut a bitch. And so I rarely drink, because if I have one drink, I'm going to want another drink. When you're ADHD, there's no such thing as one drink, one glass of wine. There's all the glasses of wine, right? And so I very rarely drink, because I play the tape forward. Okay, you have this one drink. It's 6 p.m. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to want another one, and you're going to want another one. Okay, now it's 10 p.m. You've had 5. Now you feel like crap, you're dehydrated. Are you going to get up in the morning at 4 a.m. and work out? No, you're not. Okay, now it's been one day. Well, since you didn't work out, you might as well order a pizza, eat the whole thing, and feel like crap. Okay, now I've done that. Now it's 2 weeks later, I've gained 15 pounds, and I hate everyone. All that started from that one drink, right? So when you're ADHD, you move so fast that you don't have the time to think, well, maybe I should just stop after that. No, you just go. So there's a wonderful movie that came out in the US in 1982 called War Games, about nuclear war and about a computer that accidentally almost starts nuclear war. And they teach the computer not to do that. And the last line of the movie is the computer learning. And it says, interesting game, nuclear war. The only winning move is not to play. And a lot of times when you're ADHD, and I've had to teach my daughter this as well, when you're ADHD, the only winning move is not to start, not to play, right? Which is why I don't drink, which is why I don't do whatever those kind of things, or rarely do, is because when you're moving that fast, it's sometimes really hard to stop.
Okay, I get it. It's a really good that you understand yourself so well. A lot of people would just continue drinking, even if, because they do it for the social aspect. And socially,
You know how many times I've missed a huge business opportunity by not being at an open bar networking party? Absolutely fucking none.
Okay, that's good to know. That's definitely a very good secret, and I hope that many kids hear that, so they don't go in and just go to those special networking events just to get
And that's the
the
thing.
deal.
Here's the thing. If you're trying to grow up and you're trying to build your business and trying to grow your business, here's what you need to understand. And I say this to kids and I say this to students who I coach and things like that. All these networking mixers, right? These after school events, these after work events. The person you're going to meet there might know someone who might know someone who might know someone who might know someone who might know a senior VP at the company you're trying to reach. It's a 7 or 8 step process. The person waiting outside the gym at 4:59 a.m. for the doors to open so he can work out before he goes, or she can work out before they go into the office, chances are that's the CEO.
So let's get our kids exercising.
I'm living proof of this. The CEO is not going to an open bar networking party at 6 p.m. The decision makers are at the gym at 5 a.m. when the second it opens, they can get their workout in and go start their day.
It's good to know. So let's talk now about your books that you've written. You've written 2 books, one, The Faster Than Normal, and the book that I bought originally for my son, The Boy with the Faster Brain, and I hope some of you have bought it. If not, go to Amazon. It wasn't expensive. It was only $17 Australian. So you must have had it on sale just for us. I don't know. So this is a children's book, but also teens could read it. What inspired you to write this for younger age children?
So the last book I wrote was Faster Than Normal. And Faster Than Normal was for adults about their ADHD. A lot of people asked me to write a kid's book. And I didn't, I had an idea about maybe it would be fun, whatever. But the key for me was one day I realized that if I had a book like that when I was a kid, I might have avoided 30 years of therapy spent solely trying to teach me that I wasn't broken. And this is actually an answer for Damien and for Alex and for Madeline. I'm looking at some of the questions here, and for Rita. When you're different as you're growing up, a lot of schools, and this is not really the school's fault, it's just a product of the society we're in. When you're growing up, a lot of schools, the students in the schools, and some of the teachers have a very specific, what's the term I'm looking for? A very specific sort of treatise about them, which is that if you're different, that's wrong. As a matter of fact, I think in Australia, and I might be using the term incorrectly, but I was there for 6 weeks or 2 weeks giving a keynote several years ago, and I learned a term that you guys have down there called tall poppy syndrome. Which is apparently if you talk too much, you don't get the squeaky wheel doesn't get the grease, the squeaky wheel gets eliminated. And the premise that I learned growing up is that I was very different, and if you're different, that's wrong. It's good to be different as you get older. You can do a lot with it, but when you're a kid, your whole job is trying to fit in. And I didn't fit in. It was actually a horrible. Up until high school, it was pretty tough for me, and between teachers and students and everyone saying you're broken, you're not right, something's wrong with you. I have been in therapy with a psychologist on and off for the last, 30 plus 40 years. And a lot of that time for years was spent trying to get rid of the thought in my head that I'm not good enough. And so why did I write this book? Because if this book can teach one kid at age 5 or help the parents teach the kid at age 5 that he's gifted, not broken, he can spend the rest of his life embracing those gifts and not trying to undo the damage that was done by a system that tells him he's not good enough because he's different. And that's why I wrote the kids' book. I want to prevent that from happening. And several months ago, I was speaking at an elementary school. I was talking about 150 kids, and my talk ended, and the kids started going back to their classrooms. And there's one kid came up to me, and I had noticed him because he was sitting in the front. He was looking down the whole time. I have a hard time saying this without tearing up, so forgive me. He came up to me, and he was sort of afraid to say anything, and his teacher was with him and said, "It's okay, Mike, say what you want to say." And he looked at me and goes, I've never read a book about someone who was like me, who was good. And he started crying. And he just hugged me, and I lost it. He'd been told all his life that, you're different and that's wrong. And you shouldn't be different. You should be like everyone else. And here's this book about Peter, has this faster brain, but he learns how to use it, right? And so it was a good feeling. It was a really good feeling to be able to help that kid. And so if I can do that for more kids, that was the purpose of the book.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I read the book, one of the first things my son listened to when he heard the book was, he's going to someone that has VR in their foyer, the psychologist. I want to move to that psychologist
I
because
get a
my
lot of that.
psychologist, etc., doesn't have VR. And I said, well, maybe in the future they will. You can recommend it next time you go to one of your specialists.
It's funny because I have I have a very close friend of mine who is a psychologist, and she actually helped me with some of the clinical terms in the book. And when I showed her the final copy, she goes, "Oh, great! Any kid who reads this now is going to want me to have a VR system in my waiting room. Thanks so much for that."
I can see that based on Madeline's question, that I think her child would also want a VR system in the thing, because her child is because her question is about when ADHD is hyper focus on their devices and they get all the stimulation from gaming and
100%.
asking for advice.
100%. But here's the thing. Getting the stimulation from gaming is no different than me when I jump out of a plane when I'm skydiving or when I'm going for a run or a bike ride. All they're doing is they're hyper-focusing on something they're really good at, and they're getting the receptors in their brain, the dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline, or the monoamine inhibitors in their brain, are getting the stimulation they need that they don't often get. When you're ADHD, you're born with 25% less monoamine inhibitors, which means that's 25% less ability to create the dopamine that you need to, say, sit in a boring class, right, and do something boring or whatever, or focus on this project or focus on cleaning your room. So you turn to other things. The whole reason I was always making jokes in class and acting out was because every time I make a joke in class, the kids would laugh. What would happen when the kids laugh? They laughed at me. I'm funny. Okay, dopamine hit. Boom, I could focus. Problem was I never got the chance because I'd make the joke in class. The teacher would get angry. I'd go to the principal's office. So when the kid's on their iPad, when the kid's on their device, when they're playing their Sony PlayStation, when I'm jumping out of a plane, or what I'm doing is I'm giving my brain that dopamine that it needs to focus. I will bring my laptop to the drop zone when I have a big project to work on. I will go and I will put my stuff in the corner. I will go do a jump. I'll fall from 15,000 feet. I will play around the sky. I will land my parachute. I'll take off my gear. I'll throw my whole parachute, my rig in the corner. I will pull out my laptop. I'll sit down and I'll write 10,000 words in half an hour. I'm so hardwire focused. I've also written, Faster Than Normal was written. I had a year to write it, or 6 months to write it. I don't remember. And I did all the research and I outlined everything I wanted to write like the first week, and I immediately forgot about it because ADHD. And then my publisher calls me with like a week left. She's like, "Hey, how's the book going?" I'm like, "Oh, great, it's almost done." She's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." And I wound up the next day I booked a ticket from New York to Tokyo. Armed, I get on the plane armed with nothing but my laptop, and I think a sweater, my headphones, and a power cord. And I get on the plane and I write chapters 1 through 5 on the flight to Tokyo. And I get to Tokyo. I go to the lounge. I have a soda, I take a shower, have a piece of sushi. I get back on the same plane, same seat 2 hours later, and I write chapter 6 through 10. And I land about 35 hours after I took off and I have a book because I was hyper focused in that moment. And what am I going to do? I can't walk off the plane. Here I am.
Wow. So when you wrote this book, especially both books actually, did it help you with your own ADHD?
I think looking inward and learning a lot, yes, it did. I realized, again, because Fast and Normal was written right after my divorce. And so I realized the kind of things that I was doing that might not be the best. I realized the kind of things I was doing that could negatively impact a marriage, things like that. And so learning those things really helped me. I understood sort of what I was doing, why I was doing it, and how to make those changes.
Okay. So now we're going to open to some Q&A.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with some of the questions that were sent through beforehand. And then I'll try and manage some of them that have been added to the questions, because some of those questions actually are listed here as before. So actually Matt's question, and the first one I'm going to ask, is about medication. There was a few questions about medication. Some people said, how do you feel with or without medication, with or without exercise? Do medicines like Ritalin, Vyvanse, etc. affect you, help you? How do you feel about them?
So I have a prescription for Concerta. Concerta is an ADHD med. I have a long-lasting, extended release prescription.
Mm-hmm.
I take it on days that my assistant has literally put on top of my calendar, pill day. And the reason she's put pill day is because she knows that on those days, even though she tries to avoid it, I might have 4 or more meetings in one day. I don't do well with 4 or more meetings. So she will put pill day in my calendar, and I will have the thing about extended release Concerta is if I take it any time after 3:30 in the morning, I'm up all night the following day. So I will wake up at 3:30 in the morning, take the pill, go back to sleep for 45 minutes until it kicks in, and then wake up and work out. It is very rare that I take it. I have a prescription. I have a month's prescription. I think I've had this prescription now for about 5 months. And I still have like half the bottle left. I rarely take it. For me, I can get the same chemicals, the same chemistry in my brain from exercise, from running around, from skydiving, whatever. But I'm not anti-medication. I'm really not. I do believe, however, that pills don't teach skills. So if you're going to put a child on medication, which again, I'm not a doctor, but it might, in some cases, might very well be valid. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure that they are also learning the skills necessary to thrive once they are off of that medication. Here in the US, where the quote unquote greatest country in the world has the worst healthcare system known to man, when a kid turns 25, they are off their parents' insurance whether they want to be or not. And it is a huge wake-up call for a lot of kids who might be working at a MIC job and don't have health insurance or good health insurance. And all of a sudden, their pills that they used to get for free every day now cost $700 a month, and they can't afford that. And so they quit.
Wow.
And what happens then? Well, they haven't learned how to cope, or they haven't learned skills to utilize their ADHD or benefit from their ADHD. They just relied on the medication. So I have no problem with medication as long as it comes with, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever, something to allow them to learn how to better use themselves as well.
Well, that's the good thing about us in Australia is our pills don't cost.
Don't get me started.
$700 a month.
Get me started. It's a conversation. I don't want to go down that road. It's way too early. I've not had anywhere near enough coffee to go down the road about our healthcare system or our political system as a whole. This is way too early.
Yes, it's we have other issues, but we'll go with at least for medication. It's not $700 a month without insurance. We're lucky in that way.
It really is insanity.
There was another question was asked was, how did you gain acceptance from your friends when with your ADHD, when you found out you had ADHD, how did you tell your friends? How did they see you any different, or they just accepted it and said, "Oh, okay"?
Well,
Was
it's
there
funny.
any?
It never really affected me that much. I've always had a couple of very close friends, and that's it. The rest of the people in my life, I never really considered friends. They were just people that I knew. As I, ADHD isn't something you have to share if you don't want to. I tend to share it because I think it's a bonus. But it's not like a sexually transmitted disease where you have to tell the partner or whatever. It's nothing like that. There are some people who are neurodiverse who don't say a word, and you'd never know. There are a lot of them who don't say a word, and you do know. My therapist, I was talking to him about something. This is the same guy I'd gone to for years and years and years, and I was talking to him probably 15 years ago, and I said something, and he goes, "Well, it's funny because you never talk about ADHD. You never talk about medication for ADHD." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I don't have ADHD." And that was the first day I found out that I did, because he just looked at me. It was sort of that meme where the guy is sitting there and goes, he just gave me one of those looks like, like what? And so of course I took the test, and it was like, 22 answers yes or more, you probably have it. And I was like at like 94, 95. But the thing for me was, one of the greatest gifts I learned, one of the greatest things I learned was, my biggest gifts was, I learned that it costs absolutely nothing not to care what others think about you. And that's a hard thing to learn when you're a kid, again, because you just want acceptance. But as I get older, the greatest thing I ever did was stop caring what others thought. The only people whose opinions I care about are my daughter, my parents, my girlfriend, and maybe like one or two close friends. No one else's opinions help me pay my mortgage. What's the line? Wolves don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. I go on TV a lot, and I talk about polarizing subjects, talk about politics, talk about whatever, as a contributor on the major news networks. I've been called every name in the book online. I've been questioned. My parental lineage has been questioned. I mean, it doesn't bother me anymore. I don't read the comments, right? And so my whole take is, if someone thinks I'm strange and someone thinks I'm weird, that's no concern of mine. Other people's opinion is no concern of mine. My concern is to keep being the best thing that I can and do the best I can. And it's a hard lesson to learn, and it doesn't always work. I'll give a keynote, and there'll be 10,000 people in the audience, and 9,999 of them will be cheering, and there'll be standing ovations, and one person will be sitting down. And that's the person I focus on. In my mind, he hated me, and everyone's hating me, and no one's going to hire me again. Now, for all I know, that person's a paraplegic and can't stand up. But in my head, it's all over. So I'm still having to work on it, but I find that as I get older, the less I care about what other people think, and that's tremendously helpful.
And so getting to that, it's not a 5-second change to get to that. There's many kids out there that still look at everything that's happening, and the one person that makes a weird face, and they're not even making the weird face towards our children or someone else, and the child may take it to themselves, to their head, because, oh my God, that one person looked at me weird. How do you help a child? What learnings do you have from your life that could help a child to get over that and be able to not think about the whole everyone's against me because that person gave me such a weird look?
I mean, one of the things I try to teach my daughter, and I've been teaching her this since day one, is that weird is a side effect of awesome, right? And look, again, when you're a kid, you just want to fit in, and nothing that dad is ever going to say is going to change that, right? But what I can do is I can work with my daughter, and you guys can work with your kids. Nikki, you can work with your child about teaching them to understand how they feel about themselves. And how they feel about themselves is more important than how some random kid might feel about them, right? I've been totally upfront and honest with my daughter, and I told her about the hard times I had in school growing up, and then I show her. The best example I ever gave her was a real one. When my daughter was about 4 or 5, I got an email out of the blue from someone who had seen me on TV, who I went to junior high school with. And the woman who emailed me said, "Hey, I just saw you. Are you the same Peter Shankman that went to this junior high school?" She goes, "I always knew you were going to be such a success. You were always this great kid, and you always had great ideas." I knew the name immediately, and I responded with, "That's really funny. You were actually one of the cool kids, and you made it a career in junior high to pick on me. And you sent me home crying more days than I can ever conceivably imagine. And I'm sure your memory is a little different of the scenario, but that is what happened. And while it's great to hear from you, I'm happy to keep talking with you. You just need to know that's what you did." And she replied almost immediately with a huge apology. She goes, "I had no idea. I was a totally different person back then. I am so sorry." About a month later, I posted a photo of my daughter holding she had a hobby horse, like one of those rocking horses. And she goes, "If your daughter ever wants to experience a real horse, I own a horse farm in Connecticut. I would love to invite you and your daughter up, come for the day, ride the horse." And I brought my daughter up, and the joy that I got from watching my daughter ride the horse canceled out the junior high school kid who was picking on me that whole time would never have invited me up to ride a horse. I wasn't cool. Things change, right? And the lesson I tried to teach Jessa is that, and it was hard at the time because, she was like 5. I'm like, "Jessa, this girl didn't like daddy when," and she goes, "Why, were you mean to her?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Actually, she was mean to me." And why? Well, because sometimes people are mean to people who are different. And what you can learn from that is be nice to everyone, right? It doesn't, even if people aren't nice to you. And she's like, "Well, what if they're not nice to you?" I'm like, "If they're not nice to you, you don't have to be nice back to them, but you don't have to talk to them either. You just ignore them and find people who are part of your tribe." I said, "Here's the thing." And I explained this to her. And to this day, I still explain to her. I said, "Jesse, you're magical. But the problem with being magical is that not everyone is going to understand your kind of magic.
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be some people who are going to try to dim your magic, and that's fine. Your goal is just to stay in your lane and keep being all magical and stuff, right? And not worry about what other people think, because real magicians, real princesses, real people, real warrior princesses don't spend their time worrying about what other people think of them. They just keep being magical. And so that's what you got to do. You got to keep being magical." And I think that, and then also I every night before bed, even today at age 11, we say affirmations. And I never believed in affirmations until I started using them myself. And there's something to be said for saying them every single day. So what we started teaching her every night, we had a coloring book full of affirmations. And so every night we would say them before we went to bed. And they're simple things. I'm confident, I'm honest, I'm loved, I'm growing, I'm unique, I'm reliable, I'm funny, I'm brave, I'm inspirational. My life is a wonderful adventure, and I stand up for what's important to me. And we'd say that every single night. And I really believe it made a difference. I had my parents, so I have a podcast called Faster Than Normal, and we've had over 300 episodes. And if you go to episode 100, I interviewed my parents, and I wanted to see what my parents thought of me as a kid. And one of the questions I asked them was like, how'd you deal? How'd you deal with this crazy kid who kept getting in trouble, who had no friends, who kept coming home crying, because he was so different? And my dad said, "We just kept loving you. And keep loving your kids. Keep showing them that they're awesome. It's not always going to be easy, but keep showing them they're awesome. And they will always have that fortitude from your love to keep them going." Right. And that was huge for me, that my parents, because God knows it was not easy on them, getting calls every single day from principals, from teachers.
I can say that a lot of this audience, if they're parents of children with ADHD, they're used to understand exactly what your parents may have gone through,
Oh, yeah.
because they're in amongst it at the moment, because they're getting those calls or not, or they've done something to not get the calls, or for some of our members, they're still getting the calls depending on what part of the journey they're in, because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not an easy journey. So, but seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and seeing what you've become will definitely help them know that other parents have been through it, and you're very thankful for them. And I'm sure our kids will all be thankful for us too.
Thank you.
hopefully.
That's the goal.
There's another question which also links to one of the questions that was added before, and that was about social skills. How can parents help their children improve their social skills or read the social skills and maybe even stop lying?
It's a good question. Again, so one of the things I have to start off with is I'm not a doctor or psychologist or anything like that. I know that for me, with my parents, it was always a conversation. No matter what I'd done wrong, no matter how much I'd done whatever, it was always a conversation. And it was always talk to us and let's see how we can work this out. And I had that level of, I might know that I was going to get in trouble, but I also knew that I was somehow still going to be loved, right? And I was somehow still going to be accepted and they weren't going to kick me out and things like that. I mean, there was a time where my parents got a letter home, and this is back before email. They actually wrote a physical letter, put it in an envelope, and you had to bring it to your parents when you get home. And there was actually a time where I get a letter 27 school days in a row, every single day, from the teachers because I did something wrong. It got to the point where I'd come home, be like, I'm home, and my dad would just come down the stairs and he'd hold out his hand for the letter, right? And I knew I'd be getting in trouble. I knew I'd be grounded. I knew I'd lose access to my Nintendo or whatever it was. I was my Apple computer, whatever it was I was playing. But I knew they'd always be willing to try again. And as long as I had that positive, unconditional positive love from them, and it wouldn't be easy because it would be unconditional positive love with them telling me, here's what your punishment is for this, or here's it. But I never felt abandoned by them, and I just kept hoping tomorrow would be a better day. And over time, I was able to. I remember graduating junior high. I'm like, okay, I got through this. I remember graduating high school. Okay, I got through this. I remember graduating college. Thank God I got through this. And then I had a weird trajectory for my professional career. I got out into the world. Had one job in my life. I worked at that job for 3 years. It was with a company called America Online, who you may have heard of. And after that, I realized that AOL screwed me because they let us work any way we wanted to, which is perfect for someone with ADHD. And then I get into the real world. I have a job after that. And it's like, oh, I have 8 a.m. meetings and 9 a.m. meetings and 9:45 check-ins and 10:45. This is like Russia. I can't work here. And I quit and went out on my own. And that was the last time I ever had a job. Last time I ever had a job was like 1998 and 97. And so I went out on my own, and that's when I came into my own. So the best advice I can give you as parents, keep loving your kids. Eventually, they are going to come into their own. It's going to be the creative and successful adult is a lot of times the neurodiverse child who was able to grow with support from their parents and whose parents resisted the urge to normalize the shit out of them. Mm-hmm. Right? Whose parents were able to hang on for the ride and not force the kid to lose their creativity. And I'm not saying don't discipline. I'm not saying that, it's agree with everything they do. Kids are going to fuck up. That's what kids do. Right? But that's what I do. I'm sure I've done it 3 times this morning already. It's not even light out yet. But, it's going to come to the point where you're going to see signs of brilliance. That's the stuff you need to embrace.
That's good advice. This is an interesting question. One of our members, she has a 14-year-old, and he actually sounds similar to Peter, except a little bit older. He wants to be accepted, but does very silly things to please his friends. He's an easy target. So how can, I don't know if it's a she or he, help their son to navigate the teenage years without getting affected by their emotions or without trying to just please their friends, or as Peter did in the book, try and make people laugh.
I think the best advice I can give, and again, it might be a therapist might be able to help you a lot more, but what I know is that it's a tough question, because you want the kid to. For me, it was about finding the things that I was good at and that I enjoyed and that weren't stupid. Music for me was huge.
Mm-hmm.
When I was singing, when I was playing piano, when I was doing that, was my happy place, and that was a stronger call for me than drugs or than crime or whatever. It's probably a lot different nowadays. I can't imagine if there were cameras and phones everywhere when I was 14, I'd probably be doing this interview from jail. I did some stupid ass shit when I was a kid, and there was nothing to document that, and I thank God for that every single day. But on the flip side, I also was able to discover things I really enjoyed. For me, it was reading, it was music, it was not sports. I didn't run or do anything physical until my mid-20s, late 20s. Growing up, I only ran by pressing X on a joystick. I strongly suggest find whatever it is this kid loves, and give them unfettered access to it. If it's, it could be gymnastics, it could be reading, it could be anime, whatever. Find it, support it as much as possible.
Good advice. There's a question here by Rita, which she asked quite a while ago. She wants to help her children with their time awareness, as it's very common with ADHD, that you don't quite understand the time, or time blindness, some people call it, or I've got 2 hours to do something, and before you know it, they've done so much daydreaming that 2 hours is gone. Or as you said before, you'd said 666, and then when you woke up, it was at 7.
Yep.
What tips can you give for kids to become more aware of the time? Other than, of course, there's Alexa and there's Google, and I know my son uses it all the time.
So we have technology now. We didn't have that when I was a kid. It is amazing how technology helps. One of the things that really helped me as a kid was I had a wristwatch, and I would set it 15 minutes early, and I would always be 15 minutes early to everywhere I went, which was very helpful. But the best advice I can give you is alarms. When I need to do something I don't necessarily want to do, when I have to write a report or something I'm not really in love with, I will do something fun first. I will get on the bike for 30 minutes. I'll go for a run, whatever. That gives me enough dopamine to usually get through what I have to do. And I set up alarms in such a way that I know, okay, you're going to exercise for 30 minutes, and then you're going to sit down while the dopamine's still fresh, and you're going to work for 45 minutes. Once that's over, I'll give you 15 minutes to go take a shower, go pee, whatever you need to do. And I'm going to give you another 30 minutes to do this. So you're setting up things in systems, in times, and before you know it, it's 8 p.m. and you've done your day and you've actually gotten stuff done, right? So a lot of it is key to making sure that you create a world in which these things work for you as they should.
I could see that we can use that with Madeline with the gaming. You can do the 15
Definitely.
minutes of
use the,
to do the gaming.
Game 45 minutes, exactly. Game 45 minutes, and then go do whatever you have to do.
So we'll find out if that works for Madeline. Put it in perspective this next time. So I've got a few more questions, but because we're getting close to the end time, is there any more questions that anyone would like to ask in the chat?
I will also, as you're waiting for them, I'll suggest this. This is rare for me. Giving an hour on a talk like this is rare, because normally my assistant makes sure that my webinars or things like that are 30 minutes max, because otherwise I start to fade out. Knowing this was going to be an hour, like I said, I exercised. I made sure that I had that brain capacity to do that. So understand your limits as well, right? There's a reason most of my meetings that I have, as much as possible, are walk and talks. In other words, I'll meet you downstairs in front of my office. We'll go get a slice of pizza and we'll walk. We'll go to the park. We'll walk around the park. We'll walk down to the river, whatever. in such a way that I am able to, as I'm walking, I'm continuing to feel that dopamine, right? If I have to sit here and have a meeting with you on Zoom or in person and then have another one and another one, another one, I'm going to blow my brains out. It's all about getting that dopamine in other ways.
Well, we definitely really appreciate that you came and you're spending an hour with us. I'm hoping we have kept you entertained. And we've got, and a couple other people have, Svetlana has also said she's very grateful. Thank you. And Nikki's
Well,
asked.
let me before we finish up, let me give out my contact info so people can follow me. I post all my ADHD stuff and all my I force my daughter to be in all my Instagram reels. I'm at Peter Shankman on all of the socials. It's just at Peter Shankman, one word, on everything but Twitter. I quit Twitter about a year ago, which is a bummer. I love Twitter. I used to love Twitter, but now it's a hellscape. I'm on Threads. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Everywhere. Feel free to join me, connect with me, follow me. My email is peter@shankman.com, and I answer all my own emails personally. That's the one thing I do. And then, fasterthannormal.com is the podcast. And then I run a handful of companies. One is called Source of Sources. I'm the guy who founded Help a Reporter Out, which some of you guys might know, was a journalist and source matching service. I sold that 15 years ago. Didn't like what they were doing with it, so launched it under a new name. It's called sourceofsources.com. It gives you free press from the media. And then lastly, I run Mental Capital Consulting, which is a company that helps companies attract, hire, and retain neurodiverse employees. So you can find me online. I welcome the conversation always. I'm happy to chat about this stuff all the time.
And I'll share some of that information to everyone in the emails after this talk, because I think you've shared some of that information with me. And can we do one more question before we go, Peter?
Sure.
Because Nikki has a question here that she asked if you can possibly elaborate more on the dopamine seeking and our teens are using screens for these hits.
So when you are playing a game, okay, so here, let me ask you this. I'm assuming in Australia it's illegal to text and drive, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's illegal here too. How many of us do it anyway? I'm not proud of that, but occasionally I do it, right? I'll stare at the phone real fast. I shouldn't do it. I know that. And I don't do it often, but occasionally I do. Why? Because every time we get a ding, every time we get a notification, every time we get a text, it actually releases a squirt of dopamine to our brain. We're addicted. The thing about dopamine seeking is that there's a reason certain drugs are so addictive. There's a reason cocaine's addictive. It's not that we like the smell. It's that what it does to our brain is it releases all the dopamine. Problem is, we then want more of it. It's the same thing with dopamine in any capacity, whether it's screen time or getting a text or skydiving or whatever. It's a very addictive substance. For me, I know that if I use that addiction wisely, if I play Just Dance on my Meta Quest or whatever, or I play boxing or I go to the boxing gym or whatever, I'm getting that substance in a way that is not a negative for me. There's nothing wrong intrinsically with getting on your gaming device and gaming for an hour. Quite the opposite. It creates neural pathways in your brain that are beneficial. The key is limiting that and co-signing it with other things. So, okay, today you're going to play for an hour. Tomorrow you might go for a run, right? It's that level of moderation that we don't necessarily always have, but that benefits us because, this is a reward, right? Getting on the computer for an hour or gaming for an hour is a reward, and it will make us feel good about ourselves. And then it'll allow us, with that dopamine we've stored from it, to do other things that we have to do: clean the house, work, do math problems, whatever. So I'm not against it. I think we should allow our kids to have screen time, play those games as part of a bigger picture. There used to be a commercial. Every commercial in America, when they were promoting sugary cereals in the 70s and 80s, used to say, it's healthy as part of a balanced breakfast, which means that if you have fruit and eggs and everything else, you're allowed to have this sugar shit once a day and it won't kill you, is what they were trying to say. It's sort of the same thing here. As part of a balanced day, getting some dopamine from video games is actually very beneficial.
My son will be very excited when he hears that.
I'm sure.
Thank you very much for your time, Peter. We've really appreciated it. There is Nikki has written about doom scrolling, and I can see that, and we all know that the scrolling through TikTok is the same dopamine hit.
Yeah. So here, one thing about TikTok and Instagram are designed to watch what you're doing and then give you more of the stuff you spend even half a second more time on. I don't keep TikTok on my phone. I've had clients, I've had companies I've worked for in China before. I am not a big fan of how TikTok collects its data. I'm not sitting here saying, it's going to kill us all. We're all going to die. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. However, your phone is sending a lot of data to TikTok, to ByteDance in China that you don't know about. Keep an eye on that. I mean, you're doing the same thing on Facebook and everything else, but so be aware of that. But understand that the algorithms created by these programs are designed to keep you online as long as possible. Facebook has admitted in court documents that they have hired people who were formerly marketing people at cigarette companies, right? Because they want to learn how to keep people online. When I worked for America Online in the 90s, our job was to keep our members online as long as possible because they were paying $2.50 an hour to be there. So it really is about that level of control. So if I had a choice between my kid being on TikTok and my kid playing a shoot 'em up game on PlayStation, I'd choose the shoot 'em up game every single time.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Peter, for your time. We will really appreciate it, and I will send everyone out the details that you gave me before.
Sure.
As well as there'll be a copy of this YouTube live that will be up a little bit later for anyone else to look at who has missed this session or wants to look at it again later.